But we were connected. It's good to be with you again tonight. I'm just looking for you tonight. I hope that everyone has a great week. And it's so good to really appreciate each of you who have contacted me through email and through Facebook messages to let us know how this series has helped you. And I appreciate all of the positive comments. And of course, I've had some suggestions and suggestions for the future. Appreciate all this as we go forward together, including its again, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this looking forward line. You affected a whole range of specifically. It's a subject that matters deeply for many people, especially to avoid through the criminal relationship, through religious culture, through family dysfunction, violence, or even seasons where the rules that die for the most life, really, and the family. We've been taught the question of people who know that they no longer know what they think. They no longer know what they need, and even what they think they need. Not only the fact that humans have that feeling, listening will create one of the deals that the world in healthier, better, and more grounded way. We're not talking about becoming grateful, like the program. We're talking about recovering honesty and feeling, and a much more integrated life. Yeah, I'm getting a message that sounded wonderful. Let me see the sound. You can let us know when I still everything's clearing up and sounding better. Let's just take one second here, apologize for the technical issues we may be having. Let's see if that will take care of everything. I hope that makes the sound better. It may be the live second itself. I think I've got the technical aspect of here. Just one second.
Maybe that'll work better. Okay, I'm testing now just to make sure the sound is okay. If you have any concern, you can let me know in the comments section. I appreciate those who have done so. I've had a couple of issues on the technical side here, so I hope it's clearing up. Okay. Looks like we're getting where we should be on the sound. So let me start back just for one moment. And it is a live session, so sometimes we have these issues come about. Let's go ahead and start here again. So, good evening. Want to welcome everybody to this Looking Forward Live. Tonight, our session is called Learning to Trust Yourself Again. It's a subject that matters extremely deeply for many of us because there have been many of us who've lived through either controlling relationships, through religious pressure, through family dysfunction or trauma, or just seasons where many of us have learned to doubt our own hearts, our own memories, or our own discernment. Some people have been taught to question themselves so much that they no longer know what they feel, what they need, or what they believe. So, tonight, I want to just talk about how healing often involves learning to listen to yourself again in a healthier, wiser, more grounded way. We're not talking about becoming reckless or even self absorbed. We're talking about recovering honesty, discernment, and a much more integrated life before God. So, uh, my hope is that tonight gives language, permission, and practical next steps for rebuilding self trust in a grace filled way. This conversation matters because a surprising amount of suffering comes from chronic self doubt. Many people have learned to override their own instincts, minimize their feelings, or assume that their internal experience cannot be trusted. When that happens, life becomes exhausting. Every decision feels loaded, every emotion feels suspicious. People start relying almost entirely on external voices to tell them what is real, what is acceptable, and what they're allowed to feel. Over time, this can produce anxiety, paralysis, shame, and a deep sense of disconnection from yourself. Healing is not just about feeling better emotionally, it's also about becoming more honest and more grounded and more able to say, this is what I feel, this is what I know, and this is what I believe. That kind of inner clarity isn't rebellion anyway. It's often part of becoming whole again. Okay. So, again, common experiences that we all have is second guessing every decision, apologizing for feelings or our own needs, needing constant reassurance for how we feel or think, or just confusing fear with discernment. Losing self trust has a very real emotional feel to it. It often shows up as second guessing, over explaining, and a constant inner question. Am I making too much of this? A person may remember what happened, but still doubt whether they're allowed to call it hurtful, manipulative, or painful. They may feel a boundary rising up inside them and then immediately silence it because they've been taught that their discomfort doesn't really count. They may ask other people to interpret their own life for them because they no longer feel safe trusting their own perception. This can happen in families, in churches, in marriages, friendships, and even in workplaces. Uh, Sometimes people even feel guilty for the very instincts that were trying to keep them safe. So, if that's part of your story, I want to say that you're not weak, you're not crazy. You may simply be carrying the effects of long term invalidation. So, there's many reasons self trust gets damaged. Sometimes it happens through direct manipulation, where a person is told that their memory is wrong, their emotions are unreliable, or their discomfort doesn't really matter. Sometimes it happens more subtly through shame based religious systems that portray honest questions as open rebellion. Healthy anger is considered sin, or that boundaries are considered to be selfishness. Trauma can also play a role. When a person has lived in survival mode, their nervous system may become so activated that they have trouble distinguishing present reality from old fear. In other cases, control is wrapped up in concern. So, what feels oppressive is presented as love or leadership or some kind of spiritual guidance. Over time, the person starts to live under the assumption that other people know them better than they know themselves. Now, that's a painful place to be, and it can take some real work to begin untangling that mess. One of the most important parts of rebuilding self trust is learning to distinguish discernment from fear. A lot of people think they're the same thing, especially if they grew up in environments where anxiety was treated as spiritual maturity. Fear tends to be urgent and condemning and chaotic. It pushes us toward panic, um, or just a sense of helplessness. Discernment, by contrast, though, is usually steadier. It may still say no, it may still recognize danger, but it does so with more clarity than it does chaos. Discernment helps us notice what is healthy, what's unsafe, what's wise, and what's needed. Fear often floods us where discernment grounds us. So this distinction matters because some people silence every instinct they have, assuming it's just fear, where others obey every anxious thought, assuming it's God. But healing involves slowing down enough to ask, what is this voice producing in me? Is it pressure and panic, or is it really truth and clarity? So, part of trusting yourself again is learning a healthier relationship with your own feelings. Some people were taught that emotions are dangerous and they should be ignored. Others were never taught how to process them. So feelings feel very overwhelming. The truth is that emotions are extremely important data. They're signals. We talk about this from time to time through our sessions that listening to to how you feel is important because your body's sending signals to you. That's why we often say anger may point to the fact that a boundary's been crossed, or sadness may point to some sort of loss in your life. Anxiety can point to maybe fear or uncertainty or some unresolved wounds. But emotions don't tell us everything, and they're not meant to control us. So the goal isn't emotional suppression, and it's not teaching you how to just be impulsive with your emotions either. The goal here is just emotional honesty. We learn to say, this is what I'm feeling. This is what it may be connected to. And this is what I need to understand before I act. That's a much more mature and trustworthy way of living than either denial or reactivity. We also need to recognize that self trust is not just a mental or spiritual issue, it's often physical. That's why we say the nervous system really does matter. When the body has learned chronic stress, it may react strongly even when the present moment is relatively safe. That doesn't mean your body is betraying you or anything like that or lying to you. It means your body may still be carrying old alarms. This is why grounding practices or breathing or getting good sleep, having healthy boundaries in your life, and safe relationships matter so much. because a dysregulated nervous system can make everything feel uncertain. And in that state, it's harder to know what is your intuition trying to guide you, what is trauma, and what's just simply you being exhausted. So, as the body becomes more settled, people often find that their inner world becomes a little more clear. They can notice more accurately, respond more intentionally, and trust themselves more gently. This is why we often try to encourage people that if they need some medications to help them settle down because of their anxiety is at such a level that they just can't calm down to where they can think. Because when you're so upset and you're so anxious, I don't know if you've seen or experienced anxiety attacks, but they just become so overwhelming. You can't even focus on thinking about what this is trying to tell you because you can't think straight. So that's why we encourage people to, if they need medications to be able to take that to get them to a point where you can start to work through what your body's trying to tell you. So here again, rebuilding self-trust often begins with a very basic but an extremely difficult act, and that is naming reality. So many people have become so used to minimizing their experiences that honest language feels wrong. But healing requires us to say what is true. It's okay to say that something hurt you, or that you felt unsafe in a situation, or maybe you felt pressured, um, or I need more time, or I'm not comfortable with what's going on. These simple statements may sound very small and minuscule, but they're extremely powerful. They begin to restore the connection between the inner truth and your outward speech. Sometimes for people, just writing things down, or we call it journaling, but just writing things out when you're having these moments of anxiety. Slowing down and naming body sensations can help you. It's why we say from time to time here that, is what you're feeling, is it your stomach tightening up? Is it your chest tightening? Is it you're feeling a burning sensation? Uh, you angry? Are you anxious? What's your body signaling to you? Is your arm hurting? And naming these things can help understand them. Um, Noticing where you automatically edit yourself to stay acceptable can help too. Because when you're editing yourself out of something because you're not trusting what you're feeling, it says a lot. So, truth telling isn't about dramatizing your life or over exaggerating things. If you feel like, oh, this, I'm just over exaggerating this, well, you're not necessarily. But it's about refusing to keep erasing yourself and not trusting, what you actually think and feel. Self-trust rarely returns in one dramatic moment. Now, this is important and something I want to say again. Self-trust does not return, it rarely returns in just one dramatic moment where everything just starts making sense. More often, it grows through small, repeated acts of honesty. You keep a promise to yourself. You say no when you need to. You leave a conversation that's becoming harmful. You stop pretending you're okay when you're really not. You choose rest instead of guilt driven overextension. And again, these may seem very minor, but they're actually the building blocks of your inner confidence. Every time you act in alignment with what you know about yourself, you teach yourself that your voice actually matters. And every time you abandon yourself to stay comfortable for others, the old patterns strengthen. So again, this isn't about you becoming rigid and cold. It's about becoming congruent. It's about learning again how to do this holistically. So another part of healing is learning to question the voices of shame. Many of us carry inner messages that don't sound like our deepest wisdom. They sound like criticism or fear, manipulation or contempt. You can't trust yourself. You're just too sensitive, or you're selfish. You're being selfish here, or you're just being dramatic with this. You shouldn't feel that way. When those voices rise up, it helps to ask, where did this message come from? And what's it trying to produce in me? Shame tends to make people feel smaller, more confused, and more disconnected. But conversely, grace doesn't remove wisdom or accountability, but it doesn't rely on just contempt. Grace can tell the truth in a way that still leaves room for dignity and growth. For some people, the biggest barrier to self trust is the fear that it will somehow replace faith. But trusting yourself is not the same as making yourself into an idol. Healthy faith does not ask us to disappear. It invites us into honesty and discernment and a much deeper integrity. God can meet us through a good conscience and through insight, through experiences, and even in quiet reflection. There's a great difference between ego driven certainty and a grounded, healthy self awareness. In fact, some of the most spiritually mature people are those who can say, this is what I know, and this is where I'm uncertain. This is what feels true, and this is what I need to bring before God. So faith and self trust don't have to compete against one another. In a healthy life, they often strengthen one another. So rebuilding self trust doesn't mean isolating from others either. In fact, safe support is often part of the healing process because healthy people don't demand you outsource your discernment to them. They help you hear yourself more clearly. They make room for complexity. They let you ask questions and move slowly and speak honestly. There's times where therapy can help you with that. Pastoral counseling can help you with that. A good, safe friendship can help you deal with these sorts of processes. The key is that these relationships are not coercive and they're not full of shame, and they don't try to rush you back into some normalcy or some performance. They help you become more grounded and not more dependent on them. So as we sort of we get close to closing out this session. I always want to invite good reflection questions to think about this week. Things if you want to write down, or if you just want to think about it, maybe think about your own questions. But something just to get us thinking about this as we have these discussions. But uh, first question is, where did you learn, or where did I learn that my inner experience wasn't trustworthy? In other words, where did you learn to distrust yourself? When did this happen? Where? who benefited from your self doubt. Uh, Second question is, what emotions or instincts do I dismiss most quickly? What emotions do you silence? And then what would it look like to honor one honest feeling this week about how you actually feel down deep inside, or what's one good healthy boundary that you can set? And then thirdly, what would one small act of trusting yourself look like this week? What's just one thing you can do this week to start trusting yourself again? Trusting what you feel and what you think about yourself and your own life. And then lastly, here, who in my life helps me feel more grounded and more honest? It's very important. That's why we can't heal by ourselves. We have to have people in our lives who can help us feel grounded and feel more honest about who we are and what we're about. So these questions aren't about blaming anyone or blaming yourself. They're about awareness. And awareness is one of the doors to healing. So sometimes the most important thing a person can hear is simply, you're allowed to notice what you notice, and you're allowed to feel what you feel, and bring your honest self out into the light. Access that part of you that you've shut down for so long. And as we close tonight, I just want to thank you for joining us. And if this topic speaks to your story or your experience, I hope you'll hold on to this encouragement that losing self trust doesn't mean you're broken beyond repair. It often means that you've lived through things that taught you to move away from yourself. But healing can help you come home again. You can learn to listen more honestly, discern more clearly, and to live with greater integrity and peace. You don't have to get there all at once. You can begin with small acts of uh, truth and grace for the process. So please remember that this week. You're not weak because you lost trust in yourself, because you can relearn how to be honest and have discernment and have that inner steadiness again. Because your healing doesn't require perfection, it just requires patience and grace. Ultimately, you're allowed to trust your own experience again. And I hope you can do that. And I just want to thank you for being a part of our Looking Forward Live tonight. If this session is helpful, I want you to feel free to share it, reflect on the questions, and continue the work of healing one step at a time. And anything we can do to help, please let us know. Keep sending us your comments, your emailing us your suggestions for future sessions, because this is so helpful, not just for me and for what we're doing here, but for those who are listening and who are letting us know that these sessions are meaningful. I hope you have a great week. Look forward to seeing you again next week.